She looked at him one last time, eyes full of hurt, belly full of life, and whispered, "I would have given you everything. But you gave me nothing." Sometimes we believe success will fix the parts of us we're too afraid to face. Sebastián Mendoza built an empire, made millions, and never looked back, until the night he saw her again. 3 years after their brutal divorce, he walked into the most exclusive restaurant in the city, and saw his pregnant ex-wife serving tables. What happened next shattered everything he thought he knew about power, regret, and love. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, what would you do if the person you once pushed away showed up again, carrying the child of someone else? Would you stay, or would you walk away again? Let's begin. It was raining the day Isabella signed the divorce papers. Not the soft, romantic kind of rain that makes you want to slow dance in the kitchen, but the kind that feels personal. Cold, needle sharp, like the sky was punishing her for hoping too much. She stood in the marble lobby of the law office, the ink on her signature barely dry, her hands trembling not from sadness, but from something deeper. Humiliation, exhaustion, the grief of loving someone who saw you as collateral damage. "I swear to you," she said, voice cracking, "you'll never see me again." Sebastián didn't flinch. His $1,000 suit, his platinum watch, the smug tilt of his mouth, they all remained untouched by her pain. "Perfect," he replied, without even looking at her. "One less woman to worry about." And with that, he turned and walked away, back to his empire, his luxury, his meticulously curated loneliness. Isabella stood frozen by the revolving doors, watching the man she once believed was her future disappear like a ghost in the rain. She hadn't told him, not about the late-night nausea, not about the calendar she double-checked 3 times, not about the possibility that, despite everything, life had just taken root inside her. Because she knew one thing for sure. Sebastián Mendoza didn't want a child. And she had never felt more alone in the world. And yet, 3 years later, in the one place he least expected, she would stand before him again, holding a wine bottle, and a secret that would tear him apart. She remembered the exact weight of the pen in her hand, the cold metal pressing against her trembling fingers, the moment she signed her name and severed her last tie to him. In that marble-bright law office, Isabella felt a hollow ache beneath her ribs, as if her own heart had been carefully extracted, piece by piece, until nothing remained but an empty shell of the woman he once vowed to protect. For 5 years, she had built her world around Sebastián Mendoza, the man whose ambition burned hotter than the sun, who promised her everything, yet gave her nothing but his absence. She traded her art teaching career for his penthouse soiree. She painted smiles on his loneliness and decorated boardrooms with her laughter. Always his perfect accessory, beautiful, attentive, unseen. Then came the night he delivered his verdict in a voice as cold and final as a judge's gavel. "Children are a distraction. Emotions are a liability. If you can't understand that, maybe you're not the woman for me." He handed her the divorce papers like a merciful gift, no courtroom drama. No raised voices, just icy calm and a pre-signed set of instructions to disappear. On that rain-soaked evening, Isabella walked out into the storm without an umbrella. Each drop that splashed across her face felt like judgment, like the sky itself condemned her hope. She stood on the curb while luxury cars whished past, their headlights never touching her. In her mind, she heard his final, scornful words, "One less woman to worry about." The city seemed to close in around her. Taxis hesitated, pedestrians averted their gaze, even the wind carried a whisper of betrayal. She wondered if, somewhere inside Sebastián's sleek penthouse, he paused for a moment, just long enough to regret the brutality of his own impossible promise. But she already knew the answer. Regret was a weakness he refused to entertain. As she trudged back to the small studio apartment she could barely afford, memories flooded her, Sunday mornings in silk pajamas, laughter over burnt toast, his fingers tracing the curve of her hair. Those moments had felt eternal. Now they were shards of glass glinting at her feet. Each fragment a reminder that sometimes the people we love become strangers in the space of a whisper. Yet beneath the shattered pieces, something began to stir, a fragile, defiant spark of self-worth. She realized no legal agreement could define her value. She was more than a signature, more than an ornament in his life. And the ache in her chest, the ache that once signified only loss, woke within her the first pulsing beat of renewal. In the weeks that followed, Isabella reclaimed her mornings. She painted again, not galleries full of grandiose expectations, but small canvases reflecting sunsets and childhood dreams. She reconnected with friends she'd abandoned, rediscovered the taste of simple coffee in a crowded cafe. And when she looked in the mirror, she saw not the wife who faded away, but a woman learning to stand on her own 2 feet, wiser, stronger, undeniably alive. But while Isabella took these first tentative steps toward healing, Sebastián Mendoza soared higher than ever, landing multi-million-dollar deals, gracing magazine covers, adored by the elite for his unyielding drive. He had convinced himself that success would fill every void he carried. Yet deep inside, a question lingered, one he refused to ask out loud. 3 years later, on a night he thought would be his grandest celebration, Sebastián would walk into that same city of rain and ambition, and see in her eyes a truth he could no longer ignore. Sebastián Mendoza stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Manhattan penthouse, glass of single malt whiskey in hand, surveying a city that bent to his will. 3 years earlier, he would have told you he had everything: a hospitality empire valued at $500 million, a fleet of black Bentleys, a Rolodex stuffed with the world's most powerful names. Every deal he closed sounded like a victory bell, pinging his phone, igniting fireworks in his chest. Yet tonight, the toast fell silent on his lips. Inside, the glittering gala hummed with applause. A digital ticker announced his latest acquisition, the rival luxury chain whose death grip on coastal resorts would now be his. Cameras flashed, colleagues lauded him, but Sebastián felt as hollow as the echo in a cathedral after the choir has gone silent. He raised his glass once more and forced a smile. To new heights, he declared, voice crisp. He tasted success, every drop polished, refined, intoxicating, yet with it came a familiar emptiness, that quiet void no amount of praise could fill. In his solitude, accolades became wallpaper. They covered the walls but never warmed the room. The truth was, he thrived on the chase. Yet once the victory was his, all that was left was the aching question: what now? He turned away from the skyline. Across the room, models flitted like butterflies, vying for his attention. He nodded curtly, detached. He'd long since discarded the illusion that glamour equaled happiness. And then, through the swirl of champagne and designer tuxedos, he saw her. Isabella. Her uniform was unrecognizable at first: a crisp white blouse, a black skirt that swished as she moved, an apron stretched taut over a rounded belly. She appeared to glide, professional and composed, yet the dim lighting revealed the fatigue etched around her eyes. The same eyes that once shone with laughter by his side now carried a mixture of grace and quiet defiance. His heart stuttered, an unfamiliar crack in his armor. For a moment, the gala blurred, the music dulled, even the chatter in the room receded into a distant hum. All he saw was her, the wife he pushed away, the woman he broke, the life he abandoned. He felt something raw and sudden, guilt, maybe, or regret, pull in his chest like a storm cloud. He raised his whiskey in a half-hearted salute, as if to say sorry. How dare she stand here, hale and determined, bearing the life he denied? Memories cascaded, the warmth of her late-night coffee kisses, the way she hummed lullabies in the nursery he never built, her tears when he coldly refused to plan a future with her. He recalled the ache in her voice, pleading for a family. He heard himself, voice colder than a winter dawn: a child would derail everything. Triumph had guided his every step, but now he wondered, was the price of winning his own humanity? A breeze from the open terrace undercut the stifling heat of the ballroom. He swallowed the last of his drink, the burn in his throat sharper than pain. He wanted to look away, to convince himself this encounter was nothing more than his imagination, but a single flicker of her gaze met his, and she froze, as if caught between a gasp and a smile she dared not release. They were two islands trapped in the same storm, she clinging to the fragile hope of a life reborn, he clinging to the brittle veneer of success. Yet tonight, that veneer cracked. A waiter approached with an apology. "Excuse me, Mr. Mendoza, you have a call." Sebastián nodded, stepping back into the role he perfected. But as he lifted his phone, he glanced once more at Isabella, now disappearing into a crowd of servers. His chest tightened with a question he could no longer suppress. What would happen if he chased something deeper than profit, something he once believed he didn't need? And with that thought, he drifted toward the exit, toward a truth waiting just beyond the doors, ready or not. The night air bit at Sebastian's cheeks as he stepped into the taxi, away from the glitter of the gala. Toward questions he could no longer ignore. He hadn't planned to chase her. He had no map for what came next. But every memory of her, every echo of one less woman to worry about, now burned like acid in his mind. At home, his assistant Carmen waited in the foyer, tablet in hand and an unspoken question in her eyes. Sebastian led her up the marble staircase, each footfall hollow. In the privacy of his study, walls lined with trophies and framed headlines, he closed the door. "Find me everything," he said, voice low. "I want her life, her world." Carmen's fingers flew over the screen. Within minutes, she had the dossier. Isabella Morales, teacher turned socialite's wife, now working as a server at Palazzo di Cristallo. 5 nights a week, apartment in Queens, 2 part-time cleaning jobs on weekends. And there it was, the name on her hospital records. He hesitated, heart pounding. Her emergency contact, his. He sank into his leather chair. The betrayal he'd feared wasn't hers, it was his own. He had thought he'd freed himself when he walked away. Now he realized he'd condemned her to years of struggle, alone. The next night, Sebastian slipped into the grand restaurant incognito. No Bentley, no Armani, just a plain black coat and a pounding heart. He chose a discreet table at the edge of the VIP room, far enough to watch without being seen. Through the door of the kitchen came her silhouette, Isabella, with her apron tied and her hair pulled back in that simple ponytail he once found so endearing. He watched her cradle a tray of wine glasses, her back arching against the weight of the baby she carried. He thought of the night she'd waited under that rain, clutching a pregnancy test she'd been too afraid to use. As she placed glasses before a table, she paused for a breath. He noticed the faint tremor in her hands. He understood. In that instant, the battle she fought 24 hours a day, the nausea that struck like betrayal, the fatigue that felt like grief, the fear that life might crumble again. When she turned, their eyes met. She froze, a flash of shock, humiliation, and a question unspoken. "Why are you here?" Before he could speak, a young waiter waved Sebastian's server over. "Table 4 needs vintage Chateau Petrus. 1998, Sebastian said, baritone calm. He watched her mask her surprise. Nod politely. Every step she took to fetch that bottle seemed a testament to her courage. And yet, behind her composure, he glimpsed pain he had forgotten existed, the nights she cried alone. The job rejections that stung deeper than any divorce settlement. The clandestine visits to a public clinic because she couldn't afford private care. He rose and followed her at a distance. She disappeared into the kitchen's back entrance, slipping off her apron with trembling hands. There, amidst the clang of pots and shouted orders, Sebastian found her curled on a small stool, a private island of exhaustion. "Isabella." His voice startled her. She looked up, eyes wide with panic and something else, hope. "I know," he whispered. She flinched at the confession in his tone. "I know about Diego." Her shoulders tensed. "You shouldn't." He held up his hand. "I read the reports. You were betrayed a second time. 8 months ago, you found out he was married. You tried to protect this child, your future, and he offered you money to leave it behind." She swallowed, lips quivering. "I didn't want your pity. I'm past pity," he said, stepping closer. "I'm haunted." Tears blurred her vision. "You left me when I needed you most. When the only life I carried was the one you rejected." He knelt to meet her gaze. "I was a coward. I was obsessed with winning a world that means nothing without you and this baby in it." In that silent kitchen, his admission hung between them, raw and fragile. She reached for his hand. Tentative. "Why now?" He closed his eyes, memories flooding, her laughter, her tears, her unwavering faith despite every betrayal. "Because my name is the only one you had to call when you feared for your life." She stared at him, the weight of that truth settling in her bones. A name isn't just a word on a form, it's a lifeline. He had been her lifeline all these months, even when he didn't know it. A chef called out for an order. The spell broke. She stood abruptly, wiping her eyes. "They'll wonder," she whispered. He nodded. "Let them. I need to fix this. Starting now." As he reached to help her to her feet, the clatter of pots and the hum of a busy kitchen became their backdrop, a world apart from his polished boardrooms and marble halls. Sebastian paused outside the door of La Piccola Italia, a modest trattoria 10 minutes from the Palazzo di Cristallo. No velvet rope, no uniformed valet, just a flickering lantern and the faint scent of garlic drifting through the night air. His heart pounded with a cocktail of dread and hope, two emotions he thought he'd left behind when he abandoned her. Inside, the warm glow of Edison bulbs revealed rough-hewn tables and mismatched chairs. The hush was a balm compared to the gala's roar. He spotted Isabella at a corner table, dressed down in a simple navy maternity blouse and jeans. The apron was gone. The exhaustion remained, but so did her quiet dignity. She stood when he entered, clutching a worn canvas purse as if it were a shield. Their eyes met across the room. In that instant, she saw the man she once loved. No tuxedo, no entourage, just a man stripped bare by regret. He stepped forward. "Thank you for coming," he said, voice low. She measured him, chest rising and falling, the baby's kicks echoing between them. 4 minutes late, she replied, attempt at humor faltering. He offered a tentative smile. Traffic. They sat. A waiter placed 2 glasses of lemon water before them. No wine. No pretenses. Each sip was a vow of honesty. Silence pressed in. Finally, Sebastian spoke. "I'm sorry." Her eyes narrowed. "For what?" "For leaving you pregnant. Alone, for believing business was more important than our life together." He reached into his coat pocket and retrieved an envelope. "This is for you. Rent for the next 6 months. Anonymously paid." Her breath caught. "I don't need your charity." He clenched his jaw. "It's not charity. It's responsibility." The waiter took orders. They both chose the pasta, simple. Tomato basil, nothing extravagant. As they waited, Sebastian revisited every moment he'd missed, the first kick she felt. The tears she'd hidden when her second job earnings barely covered groceries. The nights she lay awake praying for strength. Isabella watched him, conflicted. "You show up now, after watching me struggle." Her voice trembled between accusation and vulnerability. He leaned forward, eyes fierce with conviction. "I've watched a different struggle, the one in my soul. I thought I could buy my way out of guilt. I was wrong. I'm here because I finally understand that love isn't a trophy you display, it's a promise you keep." A tremor passed through her. In the dim light, he traced the curve of her belly with his gaze. Reverence and longing mingling. "May I?" he asked softly. She nodded. He placed his hand on her stomach, and together they felt the flutter of new life. Tears pooled in her eyes. "It's real," she whispered. "He's real." His own voice cracked. "More real than any contract I've ever signed." Their meals arrived, steaming plates of pasta that looked like every other entree in the restaurant, yet tasted like redemption. They ate slowly, words spilling between mouthfuls, her fears about motherhood, his promise to learn how to be a father, the raw confession that he loved her still, and always would. The evening stretched, woven with laughter at old memories and tears for moments lost. Outside, the city lights twinkled, not as trophies of conquest, but as humble witnesses to a love reborn. When the waiter cleared their plates, Sebastian stood. "May I walk you home?" She hesitated, then nodded. Under the moonlit sky, he offered his arm. They emerged into the cool air, 2 hearts tentative yet committed to the path ahead. As they turned the corner, Sebastian's voice was a whisper only she could hear. This time, "I'm not going anywhere." Isabella pressed her hand to his, and in that touch, they both knew the hardest part was over. The rest of their journey, together, was just beginning. The first morning Sebastian woke in the spare room of Isabella's apartment. He stared at the ceiling as if seeing it for the first time. Gone were the silks and marble of his penthouse, in their place a humble whitewashed ceiling dotted with small cracks. Yet he felt a warmth he'd never known in any corner office. He rose quietly and found Isabella in the kitchen, carefully assembling a tray of tea and toast. The baby's room next door was a clutter of unpainted furniture and half-assembled toys, her weekend project. She glanced up, surprise and relief blending on her face. No Armani suit, no invisible walls of business secrecy. Just him, in jeans and a soft sweater, smiling like a man who finally dared to hope. Over that simple breakfast, they spoke of schedules, her next ultrasound, his board meeting, and their fragile pact. He promised he would attend every single medical appointment, no exceptions. She promised to trust him again, one appointment at a time. 2 days later, Sebastian found himself in a crowded prenatal clinic. The smell of disinfectant mixing with his anxiety. The waiting room buzzed with mothers in various stages of pregnancy. He gripped Isabella's hand as they sat on plastic chairs, the minutes stretching into an eternity. He watched her face soften as a little girl ran past, giggling. For the first time, he felt fear, not fear of failure at work, but fear of letting her down. When the nurse finally called them in, Sebastian braced himself. He watched Dr. Ramirez with new eyes, not a hired professional, but a fellow human supporting the miracle of life. He noted every detail, the slight tremor in the doctor's hands, the empathy in his tone, and felt gratitude that Isabella received care he had once arrogantly deemed beneath him. Back at home, Sebastian sat at his desk and drafted an email to his executive team. I will be working remotely for the rest of the month to support Isabella and our child. He hesitated before hitting send, heart pounding at the thought of shareholder fallout. But with a quiet exhale, he clicked. Within hours, the news was leaked. Mendoza to miss major meetings, family emergency. Headlines mocked his softness. Tweets questioned his leadership. He felt the old rush of panic, deal deadlines, investor impatience, but he remembered the flicker of life inside Isabella's womb. That evening, board members called. Sebastian answered the first call from his dining room table, baby blanket slung over his shoulder. He greeted them. I'm sorry I missed your meeting. I was at the clinic. Their response was clinical. Your presence is expected. Sebastian. He closed his eyes, images of his newborn son flashing across his mind. He thought of the whispered promise he made when that tiny fist first curled around his finger. I will not abandon you. He steadied himself. Gentlemen, I'm afraid priorities have changed. I will continue working, remotely and fully engaged, but my first responsibility is to my family. If that's a deal breaker, so be it. Silence, then a single voice. Understood. He exhaled, relief and resolve washing through him. No more hiding behind titles. No more equating worth with profit margins. In the days that followed, he learned to juggle calls at 3 a.m. as Isabella nursed, to sing lullabies he once dismissed as sentimental, to change diapers guided by shaky YouTube tutorials. Each fumbling moment taught him that fatherhood wasn't a role he could master in a weekend retreat. It was a daily commitment. An act of devotion. One afternoon, he watched his son, Matteo, gurgle and reach toward his face. The child's eyes locked onto his, and Sebastian felt an overwhelming surge of purpose. This tiny life depended on his presence, his love, his unwavering choice to stay. That night, as he lay beside Isabella, baby's soft breathing between them, he whispered into the darkness. I'm here, I choose this, I choose us. And for the first time in his life, he truly meant it. Sebastian's world narrowed to the sterile white walls of the delivery suite and the fierce rhythm of Isabella's breathing. Each contraction brought a moment of terror, flashbacks of the night he walked away, of the promises he broke. Yet through it all, he stayed. He held her hand so tight his knuckles whitened, whispering steady reassurances he barely believed in the moment. Breathe with me, love, he urged, voice rough. We're here together. Tears streamed down her face, pain, fear, and hope entwined. In that crucible of labor, he shed every facade of invincibility. The CEO faded. The man who loved her more than money remained. At 11:47 a.m., the final push came. Isabella's scream ricocheted through his chest, and before he could brace himself, a new cry pierced the air, the raw, glorious wail of their son's first breath. Time stuttered. The world outside paused. Sebastian felt his soul fracture open, a torrent of love and awe washing over him. In that moment, he knew he would never be the same man who equated success with solitude. When the nurse offered him the scissors, trembling, he took them. With deliberate care, he snipped the cord that had bound his mistakes and her suffering into the past. The nurse placed the baby, slick and strong, into his arms. He stared at the tiny face, dark hair matted, eyes sealed shut, lip quivering. A quake of emotion shook him, joy so profound it blurred his vision, and guilt so sharp it threatened to consume him. He pressed a kiss to Matteo's forehead, whispering, I won't ever leave you. Isabella reached over, tears of relief and wonder in her own eyes. He's perfect, she breathed. Together, they formed a circle of three, a fragile new unit born from pain and redemption. In that hush, Sebastian felt a fierce clarity. Power was nothing without someone to share it. Wealth meant nothing without a family to protect. 6 months passed in a blur of midnight feedings, diaper changes, and lullabies sung off pitch. Each cry that once would have panicked him now stirred only tenderness. He learned the language of baby coos and the rhythm of toddler steps. He discovered that being present, really present, was the greatest accomplishment of all. One afternoon, in their modest suburban home, Sebastian sat cross-legged on the floor while Matteo gummed a board book. Isabella watched from the sofa, a warm smile on her face that rivaled any gala accolade. The phone pinged with an urgent email, a deal in London hanging by hours. Sebastian glanced at the screen, his old instincts itching, but then he looked back at his son, now lifting a chubby finger toward him as if to count precious moments. He closed his laptop gently. "This can wait," he said, voice soft but resolute. "I'm right where I need to be." Isabella reached out, and he scooped Matteo into his arms as if lifting the world itself. The toddler gurgled in delight, and Sebastian laughed, a sound he hadn't heard from himself in years. In that ordinary afternoon, he found extraordinary purpose. The child he never expected had become his greatest fortune. The woman he once betrayed had become his partner in the most profound sense. As they settled into a circle of love on the living room rug, Sebastian reflected on the journey from empty boardrooms to sleepless nights. He had once believed that winning meant conquering the world. Now he knew that the bravest victory was staying through the fear, the pain, and the unknown, to build something worth more than gold, a family. In the years ahead, their story would echo the truth that sometimes the greatest triumph comes not from what we take, but from what we give, and the lives we choose to hold close.